situation in Ukraine is extremely worrisome when you get a full spectrum view of everything that's happening from both sides of the story, and not just one side of the story like you're getting from the US mainstream media. In this video, we're going to go through very important, worrying developments, dangerous developments happening in Ukraine right now, and go over quickly how this situation escalated and started. But first of all, in the United States, many people do not know that Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States' son, who was recently caught for cocaine in the Navy, he is also working for the largest private gas producer in Ukraine, Burisma Holdings, which has a license in the Donetsk Basin, which the major fighting is happening right now between the rebels and the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian military. They have a license to go after and drill for natural gas. Now, this company also has Devon Archer, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's personal friend, and Devon Archer was also his senior advisor during his 2014 presidential election. He is also at Burisma Holdings, this natural gas company, which many people think the fighting is over because Ukraine does not want to lose this very important region. The new Ukrainian government, which is Western backed, doesn't want to lose this region. That's why the fighting is escalating, and that's why the rebels here are pushing forwards into Ukraine and trying to control their own region. Many people do not know this, but Barack Obama with Merkel today said the U.S. will have no other options if negotiations fail between Ukraine and Russia, between the rebels and the Ukrainian military. Many people do not know this, but Ukrainian President Poroshenko says he won't even negotiate with Russia. We reported on this 3 weeks ago. Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, the corrupt official, according to U.S. diplomatic cables, is pushing for war. He just started a mass conscription trying to get 50,000 people to sign up for the military so they could start a war, so they could be ready for war in every sense of the way. These negotiations won't work because Poroshenko does not want them to work. He wants more sanctions against Russia, and he wants more arms from the United States of America. And that's why Obama said he will give arms if negotiations fail. Angela Merkel of Germany is saying, no, this cannot happen. We cannot have more bombs and bullets in this region because we're going to only escalate the conflict and not solve anything. The Ukrainian government right now is focused on war. They do not want peace, but you are not hearing that anywhere else. Now, Angela Merkel, representing Germany and the U.S. had very strong allegiance and alliance to each other for many years, but this has been hurt with the recent revelations that the U.S. is directly spying on Angela Merkel herself. The U.S. Embassy building in Berlin is spying on their government building, Reichstag, which is directly located across the street. Because of this, Barack Obama is less popular than Edward Snowden in Germany, and she is stuck in this situation representing Germany, and she's trying to play the middle ground in this conflict and prevent a full-out war. But what we're seeing is U.S. forces, Russian forces, dividing Ukraine in kind of a proxy satellite war that's happening right now. The U.S. and NATO are not only surrounding Russia with their bases, as you can see clearly demonstrated in this video, but we also know that for a clear fact, John Brennan, the CIA director, was in Kiev a few months ago. We know that the CIA and FBI are sending dozens of advisors into Ukraine to advise the Ukrainian military on how to get rid of and destroy the rebels here. We know the U.S. government is directly assisting, directly working with the Ukrainian military general in this conflict. The U.S. has already been assisting the pro-Western, newly appointed government in Kiev in this conflict. We see MREs, we see clothing, we see the European Union recently passed a law saying that the European Union can send arms and weapons into Ukraine. This is already happening. Ukraine officially wants the U.S. into this conflict. That's why they're not trying to negotiate a peace treaty with what's happening right now in this conflict. And what you're seeing behind the scenes, behind these talks of peace and negotiations, is the buildup of NATO. Just 2 days ago, NATO announced that they're having a rapid reaction force with 5,000 members ready to go at any time to be ready at any conflict on the eastern border against Russia. Russia is answering back by setting up a military base in Cyprus, which is only 40 kilometers from the UK NATO base. These two people, these two major forces, these two major world powers are facing off between each other. Russia is bolstering and showing their military prowess by also conducting nuclear submarine exercises beneath the North Pole. So you see these forces arming up. How do we get here? How did this happen? And I think Dennis Kucinich actually explains it very well. He was recently on Bill O'Reilly, and he was asked what he would do different in this Ukrainian conflict. And Dennis Kucinich, the former congressman, former statesman, said, "What I do is not have USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy working with the US taxpayers' money to knock off an elected government in Ukraine, which is what they did," Kucinich answered. "I would try to force the people of Ukraine I wouldn't try to force the people of Ukraine into a deal with NATO against their interest or into a deal with the European Union, which is against their economic interest." And that's exactly what happened. There's even reports in the Ukrainian parliament with parliament officials saying how 300 people worked within the US embassy to promote social media to provoke protests that led to the coup. So what happened in Ukraine? Ukraine had a pro-Russian government. Ukraine and Russia are very interlinked economically. There was major protests in Kiev that were backed by the European Union, NATO, and the United States. The protesters were trying to get rid of their corrupt president, and they were successful in doing that by implementing techniques by taking over a large square. John McCain showed up to that square. The US mainstream media talked about how these freedom fighters are taking over land. The conflict escalated with shootings on both sides, and the Ukrainian government was overthrown. They put in a new Western corrupt figure, Poroshenko, with their new elections, which according to US diplomatic cables that were released by WikiLeaks show Poroshenko as a corrupt figure, but he's in Washington's pocket since 2006. So now this newly elected government is going to be more favorable towards the European Union, towards the West, towards NATO. People on the East here in Ukraine said, "What? We do not want to be a part of this. We do not want to be a part of the European Union. We want to be more strongly connected to Russia because Russia is closer to us." They started protesting and using similar techniques that people in Kiev did to overthrow their government. The US and the mainstream media called them terrorists. Meanwhile, they called these protesters freedom fighters. In the meantime, Russia said, "Well, we're just going to take over Crimea," and took their military and took over this very key political land base where they have a strong military presence, and they're also boosting their military presence right now, which called for the US to call for sanctions against Russia, and which also put the two countries against each other. So we're seeing a tug of war between the US NATO forces trying to take Ukraine, trying to make them a part of the European Union, trying to make them an ally. Russia's still holding this key political ally because there's a lot of natural gas here. The rebels are fighting back, and of course, both of these sides are being funded by these huge world powers, and it's a proxy World War III unfolding right in front of us with no end in sight. The conflict is escalating right now with these two major world powers facing off against each other, bolstering their military might all over the place. And we reported on this 3 weeks ago. Now it's finally coming to fruition. The mainstream media is still reporting about peace treaties and negotiations. Meanwhile, we know the corrupt figure, the current president of Ukraine, is not even interested in this. We will see how this will unfold, especially with Barack Obama saying when these peace treaties do not unfold, they will have to arm the Ukrainian military. A lot of information to uncover in this video. If you found this helpful, click the like button. If you know someone who's getting information by the mainstream media and buying one side of the story, share this video with them, because this story is extremely complicated and there's two sides of the story, not just one story that you're getting. But you will be getting more of these stories here on youtube.com/wearechange. So do not forget to subscribe. Just like 3 weeks ago, we called this happening. We said Poroshenko does not want negotiations. We called this. We said this. If you want more information, subscribe to this channel, and I hope you find this video helpful. Thank you again so much for watching.